actors, especially if have a lot of lines, a lot of scenes, like you got to know your stuff. And it really does sort of separate the pros from the non-pros.
We haven't had a time, where we could get together and see each other. So we're going to do a catch up in front of everyone.
Amazing.
All right. So fill me in. If we were like having coffee, I'd say, hey, Clark, what have you been up to? For my guests that are listening, Clark is a very, very established Hollywood producer. And you'll be able to read a lot of his credits. But the favorite film that he did that I love was Monster, which you guys got an Academy Award for with Charlize Theron, but there's been so many more since then. So what's like hot on your plate right now?
Well, let's see. Lots of stuff. I mean, COVID kind of put a damper on a certain amount of independent production. And so some of my movies that were sort of ready to go suddenly weren't ready to go. And so one of the things I've been doing is focusing on television. So I have some series set up at different places.
Great.
So I've been working on Scanners, a series called Scanners at HBO, which is based on the movie by David Cronenberg, which some people may know. It's a sort of a sci-fi movie from 1980, and it's about people with telepathic powers, and we're
Ooh.
doing a series based on that. So
You
that's
make it
one of my.
sound so easy. Like we're doing a series. I mean, I know as a producer, it takes a long time to get that going. How long has it taken you to get it to HBO and to sell it?
I mean, you really don't want to know how long it's taken because it'll probably discourage a lot of people. But I have been working on Scanners for a very long time. A long time ago, I was involved in some lower budget remakes of Scanners. And then we started developing it as a feature, and we're doing that at Dimension, which is the Weinstein's genre company. And then they kind of imploded, as you probably know.
Yep.
And so then we reconstituted it with an incredible writer and an incredible director and packaged it up together. We got David Cronenberg on board to be an executive producer, and it's been at HBO now for, I guess, like 2 years, and we're still trying to get that green light, but we are developing, and just in time for the writer's strike,
Right.
trying to get a script done. So yeah, these things do take time, and that is one of the biggest challenges of an independent producer is having enough things going at any given time to keep sustaining, because these projects can take a long time.
Now, if we look on the bright side of things, that's not discouraging to people. It's encouraging because we have to be realistic. This business for acting, for producing takes a very long time. And it's a huge investment. And when you say you have a lot of projects, I like to think of it like planting seeds, that you have to have a lot of seeds planted. And I think it's similar to acting in that way. I'm always amazed how you keep such a great attitude. What keeps you going? I mean, you must have a lot of faith in your projects.
Yeah, you have to be an optimist. You have to keep trying to see the silver linings in everything. I know this is very similar to acting. And I've always admired the same thing about you, that I know you are always working on so many different things and just keeping busy with, a number of different projects at a time. And so, yeah, you just have to be someone who doesn't get easily discouraged. And, if you don't take rejection well, it's probably not a good business for you. But I think anybody who's watching probably already knows that. And
Right.
so, you just have to take the minor victories as they come. You have to believe in the end product. You just have to know, like, this is going to make an incredible series someday. And so I'm never giving up on it. And that's kind of how, I approach my projects, and how, I think even when I'm selecting things to produce and choosing projects. Like you have to really find things that you love and that you care about and that you're okay, working on for years, if not decades. So, that's how I keep going, and also just having a number of different projects so that at any given moment, something may be about ready to go. Even though, the average project takes a while to get going.
Like the average project could take 10 years easily, right?
Yeah. Yeah. That's the
And it could take that
scary
long to get your
reality.
act. Yeah, scary reality could take your acting that long to get going. It's a
Yeah.
huge investment. I love, it seems to me that you have passion projects. And whenever I
Hmm.
talk to you, you're excited about something. The last time we talked was a book that you
Hmm.
were having translated from French. And is that project still in the works?
It is. Yeah, one of my dreams, I lived in France for a little while, and I would always wanted to make a movie in France, make a movie about France, and I've never done that. And so I came across this book. It's called The Bicycle Spy, and it's about a young boy in World War II living in France, a French boy in a village during the Nazi occupation. And I just found it to be really moving. I mean, it was a book that my wife and I read to our boys, and
So
so it
cute.
was just such a moving book. And I was just like, I'd love to try to make this into a movie. So yes, that's something that is a new thing for me. I'm in the process of trying to get a French writer, a French filmmaker, but again, it's a whole different world trying to do something in a foreign language in a foreign country. So I'm learning.
I bet you are. And again, inspiration can come anywhere. You're reading a book to your child at bedtime and you think, oh, so many people would appreciate this. This would make a great project. I feel
I
like
think so.
inspiration is everywhere.
I
Would you
think I
agree?
think we, as actors and producers and filmmakers, we have to be that way. We have to find inspiration all over the place, and we have to think like, wow, that could make a great movie. If somebody enjoyed it as a book, maybe it would make a great movie. Now, some things maybe are better staying in their original form, and they're if there maybe it's better to be a book, but in this particular case it just seemed like it's super visual, and it was just of a place and of a time, and so I thought, yeah, let's try to do this as a movie. But absolutely, I think we have to take inspiration from everywhere, and again, just keeping that positive attitude. We have to, I think, just see beauty around us. We have to be
Hmm.
grateful. Like,
Yes.
that's the only way to survive, in this tough world that we've chosen to live in.
It is tough. And I wonder how it is for you now. I remember you being like a very social being when we were all back in person and like living the Hollywood life and going to all the festivals and traveling. And I don't know if you're still doing that. How would you say you meet people now? Are you going back to like Hollywood restaurants? Are you networking in any way, or is it still, COVID has changed things that way?
I mean, yeah, really, COVID has changed things. I still once in a while meet people for lunch or something, but it does seem like more often than not, it's still very much a Zoom culture. Even if it's somebody
Mm.
new that you're meeting, a lot of times, we're still just doing Zoom, and yeah, it's definitely shifted the world, as we all know, and so there's less of that sort of going out. But it's also, I think, in some ways, Hollywood learned that it's more efficient to not be driving to lunch every day, because the sort of lunch window in Hollywood was like, 3 hours out of your day to like drive somewhere and have lunch and drive back to your office. And so I think that it's much more efficient in a way, even though it's perhaps, less humane. It's
But
definitely
this,
more efficient to be able to meet people on Zoom.
I agree. But does that make us workaholics?
I mean, I hope not. I'm trying to, you know, focus on things other than just work, and use the time that I'm saving to do other things. And I have a couple of little boys who are playing a lot of little league baseball right now. So, spending a lot of time doing things like that.
Right,
So
right.
yeah, but it's been a big change, as we all know.
Absolutely. And you're so right about the driving time. I don't miss that. I would go back to it for in-person auditions. I'm wondering how you're feeling about having to watch self-tapes now instead of seeing actors live.
I mean, again, it does seem more efficient. I mean, I started out in this business. My like first position was at NBC in the casting department, and I just remember like people driving up from San Diego for an audition, and then they would take one look at the person in 5 seconds and tell them thank you, you can go home. And I just thought like, oh my God, this is not a very effective or efficient system at all. That people are spending hours on the road for like 5 seconds and then getting rejected. So I do think that there's something good about it to be more self tape and more digital and all of that. I also think it gives people a chance to maybe put their best work on tape and not
Hmm.
have that
Yeah.
pressure of trying to perform in the 90 seconds that you have in front of the director or whatever. So I mean, I think for sure that the world is, I think we're using the technology pretty well, and I think I think it's working for a lot of artists. But I mean, look, I'm not an actor, so I would love to know how actors feel about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think we like the control of it, but I think we're missing out on the opportunity to be adjusted in the room. Well,
Sure,
maybe the director doesn't like the way you interpreted the role or wants you to try something else. And of course there's a callback as well, but it's very easy to dismiss someone if you don't see
it's
it right
true.
away, where the actor
No,
really,
it's true.
we're very directable. So that's one thing I wonder about. Have you thought about directing, Clark? I've never asked you that.
Of course, yeah, I've definitely thought about it because I feel like a lot of times I sort of am, giving directions to the director. And so yes, I've definitely thought about it, and I might do that at some point. But just going back to your point about the auditions, like yes, I do think being in a room with someone you really can, feel something, and it is hard. I know that shows now like they'll do like a chemistry read on Zoom or something, and it's very difficult to detect chemistry on Zoom.
What do they do
So
they do they do they pin the two actors and just have the two actors on there and you're all watching?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
well, I have to say, from teaching hundreds of hours of acting classes, you actually can form intimacy with someone on Zoom. And
You
I
would,
mean,
I'm
it
sure
can,
you would know, and I'm
yeah,
sure that all those dating apps probably would say the same thing because clearly people are
true.
forming intimacy, and they were during co- COVID as well. But no, I think look, we're all adapting, but there is something great, especially for if you're hiring someone for a big role in a main role or whatever. Like, yeah, you got to get them in the room. You got to get together. I think so. Hopefully, we won't lose that entirely.
I hope not. I really hope not. What's your project with Paul Rudd and Steve Coogan? That sounds really cool.
So that was a movie that actually got produced, that I produced a few years ago. That's Paul Rudd and Steve Coogan. It was called Ideal Home, and the two of them were playing a gay couple, and it was, I mean, they're both so funny, and they were so great together, and they did have really good chemistry together. It's a story about Steve Coogan, who's kind of the male Martha Stewart. He's got a homemaking show, and he's a great chef and all of that. And Paul Rudd is his partner, his life partner, but also his producing partner. And so he's kind of more the straight man in this relationship. And one day they're having a big elegant dinner party, and a 10-year-old boy shows up and says that Steve Coogan is his grandfather, which he is because Steve Coogan had slept with a woman in the 70s. And so, anyway, they have to decide what to do. It's sort of like Three Men and a Baby, if you will, but
I
it's about
love
this
it.
couple. who has to take this boy. And so yeah, we made that movie in Santa Fe a few years ago, and it's out there. And I really think it's kind of a, undiscovered gem. I personally, think it's a really sweet little movie that, it's the one of the realities of independent features is just that it's so hard to get them out there. I mean, there are a lot of them, and it's hard
Mm.
to get wide distribution. And so I think sometimes you have to go hunting for sweet little gems like that. But
Mm.
check it out I mean, I would love to know what people think of it, because it's a
Okay.
fun film.
Okay, we will. We definitely will. So, is streaming opened up a lot of things for you in
I
terms
mean,
of
yes and no.
sales?
Yes and no. I mean, I think on one hand, and there's been different phases. Like 2 years ago, streaming was just exploding, and they were buying so much, and they were, developing, and the streamers were sort of taking the place of, independent distributors because suddenly they were the ones who wanted all these movies. But then I think everybody realized, oh my gosh, we've got so much material now, and we've got so many series, and we've got so many movies. So as we all know, in the last year, things have been contracting, and so definitely they've created, I think, a lot of opportunity. I mean, certainly in the series world. I mean, the number of series, in the last 10 years has probably quadrupled, just because of all the streamers out there. But at the moment, I think again, people are making cutbacks, and today, Disney is eliminating a bunch of jobs, and it's just it's sort of a cyclical, you know, business that we live in, as we all know. So yes, they've created opportunity, but they giveth and they taketh away, because sometimes,
Yeah.
like at the moment, I think they're pulling back, and they're trying to have less risk, and make fewer things and that kind of thing. So it's been a tricky time for independent producers to navigate, the changing landscape. But I think that's nothing new in the independent feature world, because it's like
Mhm.
every couple of years, even before, there were different ways of getting financing, and different countries had financing, and then that works for a few years, and then it goes away, and then there was different structures. And so I think that the changing tide of the streamers is just another wave of different landscape that you have to be adapting to, which again, I think that
Mm.
applies to actors as well. Like,
Mhm.
things are things don't things don't stay the same for very long, so we all have to sort of keep on our toes and know, like, how things are evolving.
I think that's great. And just not to get attached to the way things were. I mean,
Hmm.
you and I did a project together many years ago.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
I just think, how much of this industry we've experienced and
I
to
know.
stay open to what is, and even this writer strike, I mean,
Hmm.
what can we do? We can educate ourselves on it, but at the end of the day, like, I believe in unions, and so if my union, SAG AFTRA or Actors Equity, was going to strike, then I imagine there would be good reasons. But you
Yeah, of
know
course.
what if there are shutdowns, like, what would you do during that time? You would spend that time still developing and taking meetings, right?
I mean, I think it's interesting, because I think if there is a writer strike, it's going to affect certain areas more than others. Like television series, they need WGA writers every day to kind of keep going. So obviously, TV shows are going to get shut down. I mean, a feature film, if the script is already done, it doesn't necessarily get shut down because there's a writer strike, because it's already been written. So I'm planning to just keep trying to get my projects going, and hopefully,
Mhm.
if there is a strike, it won't last for too long. But yeah, I think that's really, um, we won't know for sure until it happens. But I think that for everybody, there are ways to keep going, and I think these kinds of big forces that we have no control over, we just have to look at
Mm.
them as like opportunities to focus on something slightly different, or you know take the limitations
Pivot.
and find and figure out, yeah, pivot. is the
Pivot is my favorite word.
word.
Just
I
pivot,
know.
or I say reframe a lot. Like, let's reframe that.
No, it's
Okay,
good. It's good.
I want to get I want to get nitty gritty with you, because I once brought you into an acting class, and some of the things you said were so important to me. One thing I really, the real day-to-day things that actors need to know. One of the things you said was, one of the biggest problems is actors not knowing their lines. And I want to talk about that, because actors always ask me, well, can I improvise? And I say, no, like, the writer spent a lot of time on that script. You need to be word perfect. You need to come to set. You need to know your lines. And you actually said that you've been on sets where you've had to let actors go because of that.
hmm I mean, it's just funny because, like, when I first started in this business, like, I guess you don't think about how important knowing your lines actually is. But I just remember, like, wow, these actors, they know their lines. And you think that an actor just has to, like, come to set, sit in their trailer, and then come out when they are called or whatever. But, like, if you're
Mm-hmm.
shooting a movie, that means you're doing, like, the movie is shooting like 5 or 6 pages of a script per day. And so,
Right.
at least on an independent movie. So, I mean, actors, especially if you have a lot of lines, a lot of scenes, like, you got to know your stuff. And it really does sort of separate the pros from the non-pros, because I mean, the best actors that I've worked with, like, in addition to being a great actor, they also just know the lines. And again, it seems like such a basic thing, but it's so hard. I mean, as all your actor audience knows, I mean, just quickly memorizing a scene and being able to perform it and all of that is super challenging. And I think
Yes.
that, I mean, yeah, you can, perhaps there's opportunities to improvise, but like, especially on TV series, like, as you say, these writers have spent so much time, getting the words right, and they're not looking for someone to come out there and try to improve on their writing. I mean, maybe, there's certain opportunities to do that, but and to make a suggestion here and there, but for the most part, it's not an outline that you're just improvising off of. And this is not an improv class. Like, this is like,
No.
you got to know the lines. And so, yes,
Yes.
I've seen people let go. I've seen, scenes having to get dumped because, somebody doesn't know their lines, all of
Oh,
that. So, I mean, it's such a basic thing. And yet it's so important.
yes. And what else separates the pros from the novices? What else can you say about, you work with some huge actors. What characteristics do they have? What work discipline do they have that you can say, well, all actors should do this?
I mean, look, on one hand, it's having the lines and being ready to come in and do the scene. And then on the other hand, it's after you have that, then when we say, like, okay, we're going to do it completely differently now, or we're going to add something else, or we're going to, the scene's not working as written, so now we have to change it. So I think it's a combination of being prepared to do it as it is on the page, but then also being prepared to change if need be. And so I think those are the really great ones are the ones that can do both. um, I think that, the ones that I've worked with that have given, such great performances are just people that can really draw. And I know this is kind of your specialty, so I probably can't even articulate it, but just like people who can really draw from their own emotional experience and tap into some really deep places within themselves and somehow, you know, bring that to the surface in with the character that they're playing. I mean, again, I know people study, years and years, and they practice for years to be able to do this. But when they do it and when they're great, like, it just seems so natural, and they're just, super talented. And that's happened a few times in movies that I've worked on, and certainly one was Monster, because Charlize, we were working with Charlize, and we knew she was a good actress, and had done some great work, but I don't think anybody knew the sort of depth of her talent and sort of the places that she could go to embody a character. And that was the thing that was just kind of frankly shocking even to those of us working on the film, because she really just inhabited this character. And even when she was filming, I just remember like that was not the kind of movie where you could sort of give your lines and then the director says cut and then you just go back to your normal personality until the next take. Like she would just have to kind of inhabit this character all day and just be in this place and be by herself. And but it just was such an incredible lesson and showing me like, wow, this is someone who just like is living in this character while we are out here filming it. And she has to, because it's such a dark and painful place that she's coming from. And it's not just something that you can just sort of jump in and out of.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Almost brought me to tears, because that is the work. And that's such a beautiful example. And I've had actresses bring the 2 female scenes to class to work on that for Monster. And wow. It's challenging material. So to witness that firsthand must be unbelievable.
It was pretty cool.
Yeah. Do you find that they bring that to the audition, or do you find that that performance grows while you're filming?
I mean, I think it certainly grows because, actors, I mean, I'm just amazed by actors because you may have to be, preparing several auditions during 1 week and kind of doing all these different characters. And, you get the sides today and then tomorrow you have to perform it, or even, with less prep time. And so I think that a lot of times an audition, maybe even if it's not exactly what we want, we're at least seeing that this person can do something that's impressive, or, they have interpreted it in their own way and it's very effective. I think that what you get when you're actually filming something and, once someone's been cast, is that they do have, a lot more time to prepare and a lot more time to sort of inhabit the character. And so I think when we're actually filming a movie on set, that's when you really start to see, where it's going. But also, with a lot of actors, a lot of the bigger actors, like obviously they don't have to audition for their parts. So you also don't really know, what they're going to bring until they get there, which was definitely the case with Charlize and, a few others. Woody Harrelson, we did a movie called Rampart together. And again, he just like brought this depth and, darkness and, some humor, but also just like this other side of him that was incredible. And, just to see him do that in front of us was, really remarkable.
So you're really taking a gamble on your leading stars, assuming that they're going to bring an interpretation or a life experience that's going to lift that performance to life.
Yeah, I mean, it is a risk. And it's, that's probably the difference between actors who audition and actors who don't, is like, sometimes when you see someone audition, at least you can sort of see what they would do. Whereas, with the bigger stars, they never have to read anything before. And I think that's why sometimes, actors kill it in a role and other times they don't, because I think sometimes certain roles might fit them better than others and they actually they don't know until they get out there. So, it is a risk and you never know. And even with Charlize, I mean, when we announced, and I know this was a long time ago, but I like to use the example just because she did do such an incredible piece of work. But it was like when we announced that she was going to play this role, like people were sort of like laughing and they were sort of like, I just remember there was like an article where it showed like the real Eileen Wuornos and then it showed a photo of Charlize looking like at her most glamorous. And people were sort of saying like, oh my God, this is Hollywood's interpretation of this, true life serial killer movie. But again, Charlize had something completely different in mind, as did Patty Jenkins,
she
the
showed
director.
them. Yeah, they showed them. Yes.
So, no, it's so true. It's so true. And it was such a transformation. I mean, it wasn't, she just had this idea that she could show the world, and she did.
I love that so much. And of course, Patty Jenkins doing Wonder Woman. I mean, she's really a female's director. I love her work. And I remember when that movie came out, you were pretty close to her, working very closely with Patty Jenkins, right?
Yeah, I mean, when we did Monster, that was her first movie, and she wrote the script and she directed it, and she had never directed anything before, and she totally, stepped up to the plate and did incredible stuff, as did Charlize. And then Patty did not direct another movie for a number of years. And Wonder Woman was her second movie, even though it was more than 10 years later. Um,
Whoa,
yeah. So,
shocking.
um, but yeah, so it's kind of funny that that was her second movie. But yeah, she knew she wanted to do something great, and I admire her for being very choosy and knowing that she wasn't just going to take the first offer that came along, and she waited and found something that she really poured her heart and soul into. And I mean, again, she kind of knocked it out of the park again with Wonder Woman.
Yes. Yes, for sure. I don't want to take up too much of your time, so I'm going to ask you one last question. I was listening to you talking about actors bringing their interpretation to the role. We call that choices.
Mhm.
And, how important is that? And is that the exciting thing in the room to see when an actor comes in, what they're going to do with your material? Because
I
you can definitely play it safe and be conventional in auditions. There's no doubt about that.
Right. I think absolutely it's so important because it's like a lot of times we haven't seen anybody perform the material when we get to the auditions, right? I mean, sometimes there's a table read or something, but for the most part, like this is the first time we've ever actually seen it being brought to life. And yes, I think it's super interesting to see people making choices because as actors know, it's like there's 100 different ways to do something. And sometimes it's like surprising and shocking and just illuminating, and people bringing things to the table that we didn't even know were possible or we didn't think about. So I do think that those choices are super interesting, and yeah, they can be risky because if you make a choice that's not really what people are looking for, then obviously that's a risk, and maybe that wasn't a good idea. But I think if at least if you're making some interesting choices that nobody's gonna put you down for not at least taking a risk and trying something. And I think it's better to you know make something interesting, whether it's right or not. At least try something interesting, as opposed to sort of keeping it super normal and not trying anything too interesting. So because it is about making an impression, obviously. And we when we're looking at casting tapes, I mean, there's just often so many people that we're looking at the same time. And I think that at least if someone does something that stands out and makes us remember, like that's something. um, when you were talking earlier about auditions in person, I was remembering because back when I was a kid, my younger brother, was a child actor, and like one day he wore glasses, and one day he left his glasses in the audition, and then he left, and then he realized that he didn't have them, and he was like 10 years old or something. And then so we had to take him back, and he had to go back to the room and say, oh, I'm so sorry, I left my glasses. And then he got the job, and then so he started intentionally leaving his glasses at his auditions. um, and who knows if that really was a good strategy or not, but I know it did sort of like make an impression because he would always go back again and say, hello, oh, I'm so sorry, but I left my glasses. So, but again, maybe those are not the kinds of choices you're talking about
No, I
in
love
a
that.
in a
I love that.
performance. But I just think it's funny that he chose to do
Yes.
that.
I do too. And, I had a guest on who I think Jonathan Prince, and he
Oh yeah.
gave us a whole bunch of hacks of things he would do and the stories he would tell. Like things had just happened to him, whether he had a flat tire on the way over there, or he would always come up with something so he'd be memorable. So I like
It's
this,
so
leaving
no, it's
glasses.
the same idea. I mean, yeah, same strategy. And yes, I guess it is kind of a hack, but hey,
No,
we
I
got to
shouldn't
do
have
what we
called it a
got to do.
hack. I think it's not a hack. It's an opportunity.
Well, yeah,
It's how you frame
it's a
it.
it's a
How you
s-
frame it.
it's a strategy, and again, you
There
got
you
to be
go.
memorable. You gotta find your thing. So anyway, but yes, those big choices in auditions, I think, yeah, go for it. You gotta make yourself memorable.
Yes, absolutely. Clark, tell everyone where they can find you, the name of your production company, if you have a website or social media.
Sure. So I'm not as big on social media as I should be probably, but my Instagram is real Clark Peterson. My company is called Story and Film Inc. And if you Google that, you can track me down.
Great. I'm so happy to reconnect with you. Clark, thank you. You're always so generous with your wisdom, your inspiration.
Of course. But Rachel, I just have to say that you are always so inspiring, I believe, as well, because you talk about like reframing and just coming up with creative ideas and things to pursue. Like, I'm always amazed at what you're doing. And, I just am always so impressed with your talents and everything that you have succeeded in. So, bravo to you.
Thank you, Clark. That was so generous of you to share your process, share your thoughts on the industry. And that's really what we want in this podcast, is to lift the curtain and see what's behind it so we can go forward with our eyes wide open and know this industry so that we can master it as actors, as business people. Fantastic podcast, Clark. Be sure to check out Clark's movies, whether they're streaming or coming out in the theater. His production company is Story and Film. If you'd like to hear more of these inspirational podcasts, please visit diaryofanactress.com. Until next time, stay inspired.